I suck at communication. And that is the first thing that people say to me when I tell them that I help people better communicate with each other. And I find that pretty interesting because there isn't anything that's more important than communication. Being able to concisely express your ideas while inspiring people to listen and empowering them to act is one of the most valuable commodities that we have to sell as people, both personally and professionally. However, people are just like, hey, you know what? That's not my thing. I don't know how to talk to people, and they just resign themselves to not being, efficient at this very important thing. So, how do we get people to change their minds about this? And what are the tools and the steps that we need to give them in order to help them improve their communication skills? So I'm going to get into that in a second, but I am going to tell you now that, as you can tell, I stutter. And stuttering is a pretty difficult thing to deal with on a day-to-day basis. There are times when I have a very difficult time just saying my name. And I'm sure that you can imagine how embarrassing it is to, be like, hi, my name is Shh, and it doesn't come out. It's provided some pretty awkward situations. And then there have been other times, a lot of times actually, where I have an idea or an opinion about something, or I'm happy about something, or I'm really pumped about something, and I want to tell the story, and I just have a very difficult time telling it how I would like to tell it. And there have been other times when I just haven't talked at all because it's easier than having to struggle through a conversation. And so even though stuttering has been pretty awful, I have learned a lot of valuable lessons about, how to communicate with people in a more effective way. And that begins with how you approach a conversation. So, what is a conversation? So, all of us can agree that it's the exchange of ideas, right? Like, person A has a thing that they want to talk about, and then they tell person B, and then they go back and forth until they come to a resolution, and then, it's over. End of conversation, right? And we all approach conversations about the same way, right? Like we think about how we want to sound, and the words that we want to use to get our point, across, right? And how we want to feel, as the conversation is going on and at the end of the conversation. So in short, the conversation is pretty much all about us. And that is the exact wrong way to approach a conversation, right? When you're going into a conversation, in order for it to be more effective, you have to make the conversation about the other person. And the first way to do that is to listen more than you talk. So this is me. I'm around 3 years old in this pic, and I know I'm painfully adorable. This is around the age that I began to stutter. And it's actually pretty normal. A lot of kids who are around the 3 or 4 year old age have some sort of stuttering issue. But after they hit 5 or 6, it generally just goes away. And on top of that, there was a lot of stuttering in my family, and everybody else pretty much outgrew it. And so my parents didn't really think anything of it because, all signs pointed to it just going away. Obviously, it did not just go away. And so as time went on, as I got older, as I hit, high school and prom and college and all of those other things, it became pretty clear that I was just gonna have to deal with this for the rest of my life. And so, like a lot of other stutterers, I developed coping mechanisms in order to deal with this stuttering. And the number one way to deal with it was to avoid it. And so I developed a lot of just techniques to avoid stuttering. I would use a lot of filler words like and ah, and I would also change words in my head. So if I would come to a word that I couldn't hit out, I would, just change words, and then that was it. And so it eventually came to a point where I was just having a very difficult time avoiding it. And so I decided that it would just be a lot easier to just, only talk if I absolutely had to, which was a really great idea until I realized that people either thought that I was either uninteresting or I was uninterested in them. And it came off kind of like this. Obviously, that did not go over very well, and I did not make a lot of friends that way. And so over time, I had to learn how to be, an active part of the conversation without having to talk a lot. And so I began to ask people a lot of questions, right? And so as I was asking people questions just about themselves, I would eventually hit on a thing that they really loved to talk about and that they were passionate about. And then they would talk about it and be just very excited and very happy. And, as I did this more and more, I realized that people began to take me, and they began to really like me, which was kind of crazy because I wasn't doing a lot of the talking. The people were just talking about themselves. And I think that this is because we live in a sharing society, right? You can put all of your information, on the internet for everyone to see. And it actually makes sense that we're constantly sharing things about ourselves because we are people and we just want other people to like us and to accept us, right? And so, because I was asking people a lot of questions about themselves, I was giving them a platform to share about themselves with me. So I basically just took the sharing society offline, and I allowed them to be Facebook, basically in person, right? And another thing that that I learned through this process of just asking people questions a lot, another result that happened was that I came off as a lot more empathetic. And empathy is an incredibly important what am I trying to say here? The key to communication is basically empathy. That's what I'm trying to say. So, like a lot of other stutterers, I went through a couple of therapy experiences. I was in therapy when I was around 8 or 9, and I did that for several years until about high school. And then I started up again in my late 20s because I realized how much stuttering was just damaging my relationships, both personally and professionally. And so I found a therapist who was around my same age and who was also a person who stutters. And so I thought this was great. I was going to go to her and I was going to learn techniques to, help me to not stutter and to just have an easier time talking. And that is not at all what happened. I learned 2 things from her. I learned how to be more accepting of the way that I speak, but a lot more importantly, I learned how to be empathetic towards another person. There were a couple of other people throughout my life who I knew also stuttered, and I would avoid them because I didn't want to experience it through their eyes, right? So every time they would come into a room or come into the conversation, I would leave because it was just a really painful experience, and so I didn't want to have any part of that. Being in therapy with another person who stutters, it forced me to deal with that fear. And it also helped me to open up a lot more to her, because I knew that she understood exactly where I was coming from. Sorry, more technical malfunctions here. Empathy is important because it is the cornerstone of connecting with other people. Empathy creates the environment for other people. Sorry about that. There we go. Empathy creates the environment for other people to share meaningful details about themselves with you. And I learned this firsthand after I started speaking in public. So I've been speaking for about a year and a half as a way to get out of my shell. I was pretty terrified to talk to people one-on-one, and so I just decided to overcome the fear by getting in front of a group of people and talking about the thing that scared me the most. I was pretty terrified at the beginning just because I didn't know how people would accept me. I mean, I am a person who stutters and I'm speaking in public, and it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I thought I would be judged pretty harshly, and that's actually not what happens at all. People embraced me, and more importantly, people wanted to share things about themselves with me. And I think that's because I was willing to tell my whole story. So after these talks, people would come up to me and they would tell me things that they were truly afraid to say, or that they were ashamed of, right? And so, because I showed my vulnerabilities and my fears, the other person was empowered to show me theirs. I think that the big lesson in this is that people who resonate with perfect, they resonate with flawed. You know, a lot of people are going to tell you that you have to be the best conversationalist in order to be a strong communicator. They're going to tell you that you have to be the most articulate person and that you have to be incredibly charismatic in order to move the masses. And I don't think that's true. I think the key to strong communication, both at work and also just in life in general, is this: to be empathetic enough to listen to other people's stories and courageous enough to share your own. Thank you.